The following is a Hoop Ball presentation. Welcome to the Fantasy NBA Today podcast.
There are few things greater, ladies and gentlemen, than a classic, good old-fashioned Big Wednesday. I'm telling you, man, that was a fun night of basketball. A lot of stuff going on. Unfortunately, a few too many blowouts for my liking, but plenty of games in there with cool things that we can utilize in our fantasy analysis. Oh, yes. Oh, yes, indeed. Dan Besbris here. Well, hello, everybody. This is Fantasy NBA Today, a hoop ball presentation, also a proud partner of the Dash Radio Network, at @_radio, and of course, Nothing But Net channel. That's where we're hanging out, at NBN-radio, if you want to give them a follow on Twitter. I'm at Dan Besbris on Twitter, and Hoopball is at Hoopball Fantasy and at Hoopball Tweets. Before I even get into what's to come on today's podcast, because it's generally going to be a fairly recognizable format for today's show, I want to thank everybody that got involved in our DFS contest yesterday. We had our second ever Beat the Expert competition over at DraftKings featuring Mike Apotria. Also, we ended up having a couple other experts drop in there. I was in it, though I certainly don't count myself as an expert in DFS. I am wretched at DFS. You know how I feel about getting cute in season-long fantasy. We've talked about what that means. Basically rotating guys in and out based on what teams they're playing against and stuff like that. I think it hurts you more than it helps. You out-cute tinkering, I think they called it on the league. A tinkerer. I am not a tinkerer. I am generally set it and forget it kind of guy when it comes to the dudes on my team that I trust. So with DFS, which is like the ultimate tinker, you use all of the data you have for that one individual day, and then you pick the best matchups, and you pick the guys that you think have a path to getting to additional minutes because maybe somebody else is out on the team or whatever. Not my forte. I was in the competition, and I got my butt kicked. Our buddy Neil Rochlani was in there. He got his butt kicked, too. Brewski, I think, generally got his butt kicked. I'm trying to think of who didn't. I think Zach Feldman actually had a really good showing in that contest yesterday. But overall, what we were more concerned about are you guys, the listeners, the hoopball readers, the subscribers, and how you did in the competition. It looks like things went pretty well. Somebody named Shanos came in first place. That guy gets a t-shirt, or gal, I don't know. In addition to the $15 winnings for the $3 contest. Pretty cool, too, if you opened a new account and just made a minimum deposit, you get a free ticket to enter a $3 competition. So actually, you could have made, which is what I did, by the way. I opened a $6 account and then got a $3 bonus. So I played yesterday's for free. I'll enter the next couple, and hopefully, if I can get into the top 10 in one of those, then I can fund myself to play a few more. It's all for fun. It's for fun. I mean, if you want to really win a bunch of money, there are probably other competitions where you can do that quicker, or you can go with if you're really good at DFS, you go with, obviously, the sort of bulk entry style of play. But this was a lot of fun. This was great. We got all 50 spots filled up. You guys were amazing. You packed the house. It'll be happening again next Wednesday, because as long as this contest is successful, as long as we're filling up the room, DraftKings is going to keep letting us do it. And it's a great contest because the entry fee all goes into the winner's pot. The top 10 get $15 a piece when the room is full at 50 entrants. There's no cut that goes to DraftKings there. They're not taking anything from us. It's part of what this cool partnership is. DraftKings kind enough to let Hoopball host these contests. And so basically it's a regular roll. You know, you're not losing anything to the house. You have an even odds opportunity here. It's like, I don't know if any of you guys are dice rollers out there, but taking odds in craps is the only bet in all of Las Vegas where you actually have perfect odds with the house. It's an exact split right down the middle. Long-term, 50-50. So all you need is a tiny bit of luck, and you can actually win that thing. That's what happens in this thing. Now, obviously, there's more skill involved, and that's part of this whole discussion that almost kept DFS off the table for so many years, where you're picking your team, right? It's not like it's not like craps where somebody's just throwing dice down a table. This is you're actually selecting 10 players, but at the same time, it is indeed a split odds kind of thing. The house isn't taking anything. You're not going to lose long term if you're okay. So it's pretty cool that they're letting us do this. Again, it'll be back next Wednesday with another Beat the Expert competition. I will make sure to let everybody know the links as soon as they come out, and I hope you guys will join us for them again, especially the winners. You guys should be in there for the next 5 of these bad boys because you just won $15 a piece. Very cool. Thank you again. You guys are awesome. I have not gotten down on bended knee lately. I'm going to do it at the beginning of today's show. And please, if you like these podcasts, especially if you're finding us for the first time through Dash Radio, let us know. Rate and review the podcast through iTunes in particular. That's sort of the big boat in all of this. And subscribe. Whatever service you're using, subscribe. That is the most important thing for us. It makes sure that you see these pods when they come out. You don't have to think about it. Subscribe. You guys hear it, and I will keep saying it. But again, thank you to everybody that joined the contest, and thank you to everybody who is rating and reviewing and considering rating and reviewing the show. I am most appreciative of that. Okay, we got things to talk about. What are those things, you ask? Well, a massive Wednesday card to go over. 11 games last night, and we're not going to go through all of them because, again, this is storylines, not box score breakdown. Neil and Adrian take care of that. They do an hour plus basically every night on just the box scores. Those guys are grinding it out, man. You should be listening to that show. I'm going to try to get one of those dudes back on this podcast early next week. It's Thanksgiving week, so it's a weird one coming up next week, and it seems the perfect time for us to talk to old friends. We'll be like an old get-together, right? When you guys used to go home from college and see your high school buddies over Thanksgiving week. That's what we'll do here on Fantasy NBA today. In terms of today, we're going to talk about the Wednesday storylines. We got a visit from Ryne Buchanan of the Blazers Edge, which is a lot of fun, by the way. You can tell how much I'm enjoying the interview segment, or you will when we get there, because he's a fellow play-by-play guy. I love getting these play-by-play guys. I love when they end up somehow falling into basketball coverage like I did. They're just like, you're going to say, it's going to sound like I'm talking to me. Both of us doing like the fastball on the outside corner thing. And we'll dig into the Blazers' hot start. Yes, the Lakers have beaten them twice, which as a Laker fan, I'm pretty excited about. But overall, Portland's been very good. They're in the top 3, I believe, in the Western Conference right now. They were, certainly, before they lost last night. And I don't think that changed because I think the only team up at the top of the West that really did well yesterday was the Lakers. Anybody else? No, I mean, the other teams that had been winning out West got their butts kicked. Sort of a weird turn of events last night. So we'll talk to Ryne Buchanan of the Blazers Edge, and then we'll, of course, set the stage here for a relatively short Thursday card, which doesn't mean there's not going to be anything going on. Just because it's only a few games. I'm also excited, by the way, in looking back at yesterday, that basically every gambling thought that I gave out on yesterday's podcast came to fruition. I mentioned Philly as a fade with their new superstar. It was going to take some time to gel. I mentioned, what was the other one we were looking at? Detroit in Toronto. I said I didn't really want anything to do with that, but it was a Dwayne Casey kind of revenge situation. I mentioned Memphis as being better than people realized. I mentioned Dallas as being on a revenge game. All of these things, although the one that I did talk about the most was Orlando. That was the one that I liked. I know people were like, this is a very difficult wager to make, but not only did they cover the 6 points as an underdog, they won that game outright by 5. That's an 11-point cover. That's what we in the biz call an easy one. So that was pretty cool. I think we're getting to that part of the season now, and it's never super clear when that moment is, but after about 3 weeks to 5 weeks, the league settles in, and you start to be able to play the angles that you know are legitimate ones, and have been for many years. Superstars being added to a roster is always a reason to fade for a week or two. Teams on revenge is a big deal if they're playing the same team 2 times in fairly rapid succession, provided there has to be a measure of pride involved in this. Utah lost by 50 yesterday. I'm probably putting every cent I own on the Jazz the next time they play, and I'm not even looking to see who they're playing against. Let's see. What's their next game? In Philadelphia? Oh, my God. Oh, my God. That's on Friday. That's a good one. Utah coming off a 50-point loss against a team trying to figure out how to work in their new superstar. Ooh, doggy. Let's see what the line is on that game before we do anything crazy, but I salivate. I salivate at the thought. Otherwise, yesterday, lots of angles to pursue here from a fantasy standpoint. So we'll just start at the top and work our way through the most interesting ones. Orlando-Philly was obviously one of our semi-homework games. Wanted to see what happened generally with the other guys on Philadelphia because, Embiid's going to be okay. Simmons is going to do a decent amount. We didn't yesterday, but it'll work itself together. Jimmy Butler eventually is going to be a great fantasy star there. He was playing sidekick in this game. You could see it. And then our other question was, well, what happens with Mike Muscala and Wilson Chandler? They generally split the power forward minutes in yesterday's game. The two guys combined to play about 49 and a half minutes. So roughly 90 seconds they were on the floor either with each other or at a different spot on the floor. They didn't split the minutes right down the middle at power forward, but it was pretty damn close. Wilson Chandler had the better game yesterday with 14 and 4 and 1 steal. He shot 6 out of 10 from the field. That is fine, but if he doesn't get up to 30 minutes, that type of fantasy stat set is not going to be enough. He doesn't assist. He doesn't rebound a ton. Rebounds a little bit. 4 rebounds in 24 minutes is actually not terrible for a forward, but it's not move the needle kind of stuff. He doesn't do a ton on the defensive side. He got 1 steal in this one, and he's not going to shoot 60%. So this was also a game where he made 1 to 2 shots more than on the more average evening for him. So usually you'd expect that scoring to be more in the 10 to 12 range as opposed to 14. I don't think it's going to be enough. I just don't. To me, and what I tweeted was, I think that either he or Muscala, their value is going to have to come at the defensive end of the floor because they're just not going to have enough opportunities as the 5th option on this team on the offensive side. Now, Ben Simmons only took 5 shots in this game. Was that Orlando? Was that just him trying to work in the new pieces? Not entirely clear on night number 1. But the pecking order is very clearly Embiid, Butler, Simmons, not necessarily in that order. Redick is your 4th guy, and then you're talking about either Chandler or Fultz or Muscala as the 5th guy. If you're a 5th option, you're not going to be very, very consistent on the offensive end. You're just not. So, no, I don't want any part of those guys right now. Orlando, Jonathan Isaac came back from the basketball disabled list. He played 16 minutes on a restriction, had 4.6 boards and a block. Not a bad first game back. Let's hope that 16 can rev itself up into the high 20s, maybe even 30, because frankly, if you just doubled this line, 8, 12, and 2 blocks, you'd be pretty satisfied. But, we're always going to be hoping for more. This is a guy who, and I know everybody's getting tired of the hold on to Jonathan Isaac stuff because it has been a very slow start to the year, but this is a guy who, and we saw it last year, when he's healthy and when he's able to find his place with the team, he can go completely crazy on the defensive side of the ball. He can legitimately average 3 defensive stats per game. And we've walked down this road on this particular podcast before and said, okay, how many guys in the NBA are actually averaging 3+ defensive stats combined? The answer is exceedingly few. Anthony Davis is at 4.6, which that's crazy. That is so crazy. 4.6. And, by the way, his percentages aren't even as good as they usually are. Like, he's under his career in free throw and field goal percent so far. So if those equilibrate, we're talking about him being the runaway guy again right now. James Harden is at 3.2 right now, but that's not going to hold. It never has, and it won't in the future. Paul George is at 3.1. There actually is a chance that he could stay above 3, albeit somewhat of an outside one. Jimmy Butler is at 3 right on the nose. That has a prayer of staying in that spot, although the blocks will probably come down. John Wall is at 3.1 right now, combined steals and blocks. And I think that might be it. No, Hassan Whiteside, because he's actually averaging 3 blocks all by himself. So he didn't even need the steals category. But to his credit, he does have one half of 1 steal per game. This is the list so far this year, at least of guys inside the top 100, and I haven't looked to see if anybody's floating around way down the list, but likely they're not, because if you're averaging 3 combined steals and blocks, you're probably up there in the top 50. This is why we're telling you to hang on to Jonathan Isaac. It is difficult, I will give you, because he's been not good so far. He's outside the top 160 in 12-team leagues, 9-category 12-team. And he's worse than that in 8-cat because he doesn't turn the ball over. But he's averaging 21 minutes a game, and he's at 1.7 combined steals and blocks. That's a number that really can only go up for him. Last year, he played 19 and a half minutes per game. He averaged 2.3 combined steals and blocks. If he gets up near 30, this is what we're talking about. Potential for 3 combined steals and blocks. There are so few guys that can do that. He could hit a 3-pointer. I mean, that's nuts. That is nuts type stuff. So the hope for him is not that he's going to be like a 15-10 guy. That's not what we drafted him for. The hope is that he can give you like 10 points, 7 rebounds. I don't care if he has an assist, 1 3-pointer, and a combined 3 defensive stats. That's what we're looking at. It's a guy that can win you 2 defensive categories in a week. Those guys are so rare. You cannot give up on that just yet. We're always watching the Cleveland Cavaliers, and they were terrible yesterday. Larry Nance played well in his 26 minutes on the floor. Tristan Thompson got into foul trouble and played like 3 minutes in the first quarter instead of his usual 10. So he was 7 minutes under his normal point for this game. And he still had 9 and 8 with 2 steals and a block. I mean, he's a must-start guy right now. It's crazy, but it's true. The guy that I'm actually keeping an eye on in this game is not Colin Sexton, believe it or not, who has scored 24 points, but again, does very little else for fantasy players. The guy that I'm keeping an eye on is David Nwaba. Now, he's been seeing more time the last 2 games. They've both been blowouts, and it's not 100% clear if all of his extra minutes came because of the blowout or because he's just hustling his way into additional minutes. He is a guy you should be watching very closely. Very closely. His fantasy game translates exceedingly well when he's out on the floor for long stretches. You could see it in these last 2 games. In the 2 games now where Nwaba has actually played a full complement of minutes, which, by the way, is still only 27 and change at this point, he's averaging 14.5 points, 6 rebounds, 1.5 assists, 1.5 steals, and half a block, 1 3-pointer. That's easy top 100. That's easy top 100. Generally better than that. Now, the question is, does this hold up as, one, guys get healthy in Cleveland? Because Chetty Osman came back yesterday. George Hill is probably 2 weeks out. Sam Decker's 2 weeks out. Kevin Love is a month away, month and a half. I don't know. It's still a long time, so we won't worry about that one just yet. My hope is the answer is yes, because Rodney Hood did not play much yesterday, and he wasn't in any huge amount of foul trouble, just kind of sucked. J.R. Smith kind of sucked. Is David Nwaba the future in Cleveland? No, probably not. But he's a very good rebounding guard, which is a cool thing to be able to throw onto your fantasy team. You guys know how much I love getting sort of off-kilter stats from guys. I love guards that rebound. I love forwards that assist, so on and so forth. The 3-pointer, by the way, is you could count that, but doesn't excite me all that much. Nwaba played, there were a few stretches last year. This is what we'll harken back to. There were a few stretches where guys got hurt in Chicago, and he was able to put up solid numbers. Over the entire season, his numbers won't jump out at you because the averages were, he went through long stretches where he was playing like 14 minutes a game and not putting up numbers, and then he went through some stretches where he was playing 28 to 31 minutes a game, and he was. So you can't look at the full season with Nwaba last year. You got to look at those individual pockets where they sort of, turned him loose, because turned loose Nwaba just means more hustle plays. But when he got out there and he got consistent minutes, it was fun. There was a stretch it was like mid-February. Let's get the exact dates here. Let's be specific. February 22nd through March 5th, he had a window where guys were hurt, and he was able to play 33, 34, 31, 32, 33, 29 minutes over that stretch. And in those games, he was robust, ladies and gentlemen. He went for 21-9 with 5 cash counters. He went for 14-9 with 0 cash counters, and a weird twist in that ball game. 6-6, so that one he dialed it back a little bit, but did have 2 steals, 2 assists, and a 3-pointer. 11-6 with 3 steals and a block, and a 3. 10-11 with 5 assists, 3 steals, a block. I mean, this is the type of stuff. These hustle stats translate well. The thing maybe that jumps out at you again, this is a wingman. In that stretch, he had games with big offensive rebound. 2 offensive, 2, 0, 3, 2, 2, 2. This is a guard who's really busting his butt. I mean, that was a 6-game stretch. And in those 6 games, we could say it a 7-game stretch. Let me see how far I'm taking this thing. Let's go 6. In those 6 games, he had 2 offensive rebounds 4 times, 3 once. And one time he did have a 0 in there. They got clobbered in an odd twist by the Brooklyn Nets. So he's hustling, which means the rebounds are going to come. When guys are really busting it, steals are going to come when guys are hustling. He shoots the ball well because a lot of his stuff is drives to the bucket. I'm not saying you pick him up, so we don't want to get ahead of ourselves. And he's not a fantastic foul shooter, so when he's hustling hard and he's getting to the rim and getting hit, it's actually not good for you. But he is a career 49.5% shooter from the field. He'll get you rebounds, he'll get you some points, and he'll get you a smattering of defensive stats. I like that. I hope that it sticks. I'm not certain it does, but we're going to keep one eye on David Nwaba. If he does it again in a non-blowout, let's find out here. Let's find out who the Cavs are playing in their next ball game. It's Detroit, and it's like a week from now. They don't play for a while. The 19th is their next ball game. What is that, Monday? Yeah. All right, well, we can sit and think about it. That's annoying. Anyway, we'll keep an eye on that for Monday. That'll be a game in Detroit against the Pistons. Let's hope that it's competitive. And I'll tell you right now, if Nwaba gets these big minutes again, if he plays, 14 minutes in the first half of that game and it's not a blowout and everything else is equal, I might consider picking him up mid-game. He's a difference maker. He's a difference maker because he's an across-the-board guy. He could get you 1 3, he could get you 1.5 steals, he could get you almost 1 block. I love it. And he's owned almost nowhere. Amazingly, he is owned in our Hoop Ball League. He's owned in 1% of fantasy leagues, and it's that one, basically. Not that I've been paying any attention to that anyway. Next item on the docket, the Miami-Brooklyn game. We had a couple of questions on both sides. Sounds like Dwayne Wade is out for one more game, so that means Wayne Ellington can keep chucking up 3-pointers, and Tyler Johnson has a little more wiggle room. I'm not making a move on those guys until I see what happens with Wade back. But it does appear as though Justice Winslow is going to play big minutes and put up terrible percentages until at least James Johnson is back. And it does appear as though Magruder, Richardson, Dragic, and Whiteside are sort of the 4 guys that you can trust. The Brooklyn side of this game is the one that we were really watching for coming into it, and that basically was the what happens post-Karis LeVert. Well, number one, Jared Allen was also sick, so he missed his second consecutive ball game. And for all of us here in the fantasy world, we thought, oh boy, here comes Rondé. And he almost did. He went 2 for 5 at the free throw line, which was a big drag on what could have otherwise been a pretty good ball game. But I am a little bit, I don't want to say miffed, but a little bit concerned about the fact that despite all of these guys being out, he still only played 23 minutes. Partially, I think Miami, because they are such a big team, they couldn't run a ton of Rondé at the 5 in this ball game the way that they did in their last one. So they had to use, Brooklyn had to go to a little bit more Ed Davis than they normally might. Kenneth Farid actually played 8.5 minutes in this ball game, which, go figure on that one. I do still think Rondae is going to be good for some nice stuff going forward, but we're going to keep an eye on that next ball game. And I might even consider throwing him on the bench when Jared Allen is healthy just to see how the minutes actually shake themselves out. Does Rondae take all of the backup center minutes and some power forward stuff? Does he not see much at the center if there's a big guy on the other team? There are some small concerns there because Brooklyn, they played 12 guys yesterday. They played the whole damn roster. Shabazz Napier actually had a really nice ball game in this one. So maybe he sees a little bit of a boost. I don't know. I think Spencer Dinwiddie for sure sees a boost with LeVert out. D'Angelo Russell should have seen a boost, but he was terrible, and this happens with Russell. He is so incredibly inconsistent still that one day he can have that beefer of a game, and then he comes back with this one and lays a complete egg. Terrible shooting night, too many turnovers, only one cash-counting stat. This is like, you really do expect more when he's supposed to be the guy leading the first unit. So we'll see. Next ball game, we'll get a better idea. They only put up 107 on Miami. Maybe we'll get it going, and we'll find out a little bit more. But Dinwiddie and Rondae Ellis-Jefferson to me feel like guys that should have value going forward. I'm frankly not sure how many other guys on that team will. Allen, obviously, when he comes back, and then Russell should. But as I said on the Big 3 podcast over at the ITL, it's going to be the weirdest fantasy lines ever, where he's going to have these games where he pops off for 31, 6, and 5 with like 9 turnovers, and the shooting is going to be like 13 for 34 with 6 out of 9 free throws. So you're going to be looking at it like, yeah, oh. And it's going to average out to, top 100 probably, but it's going to be a weird ride, guys. It's going to be a weird ride for old D'Angelo Russell. Toronto is the next team on our docket. Serge Ibaka sat this one out with a knee issue, which meant more Jonas Valanciunas, but it actually didn't turn out all that great for him. He did go for 14 and 6, and that's fine, but we were hoping for more. Danny Green, my love, my sweet, hurt his back in the third quarter and ended up missing likely about the last 10 minutes of his floor time. I don't know that it was going to be a great game anyway. He only ended with 5, 2, and 1 with a three-pointer and no defensive stats, but he wasn't in foul trouble. There was a chance. And with Danny, the thing is, I know you watch these games and you're like, Dan, please, get a hold of yourself. We get it. You like Danny Green. But he's a guy that does his offense in little spurts. He's not a guy like a superstar who gets a couple touches every 5 minutes. With Green, it's like he could do nothing for 9 straight minutes, and then he'll take a three-pointer on 3 consecutive possessions and make 2 of them, and suddenly you're like, oh, okay, cool. So again, with him, it's always going to be on the defensive side. I'm throwing him on my bench until we know that he's healthy. I wouldn't be surprised if maybe this is something he tried to play through in the last ball game, made it, and then this one was like, no, enough is enough. I got hit on a screen, and now it's just too much. So no, you're not dropping him. Obviously, this line is a clunker, but getting hurt mid-game is a valid excuse. And for Toronto, they're struggling right now. The offense has hit a little bit of a snag. They still shot the ball well, but turned it over 20 times. And they lost to a team that they should have beat. Such is the long NBA season. By the way, the Moose got loose for 17 and 9, but this is, again, because Andre Drummond was on the other side and Serge Ibaka was out. Takes a lot to get to the point where Greg Monroe gets himself a big beefer of an evening. So let's not freak out. No ads or drops as a result. My God, how good is Pascal Siakam, though? Goodness gracious. Dominant. The Knickerbockers, they tried another new lineup, and it was still terrible. They threw Kevin Knox and Emmanuel Mudiay into the starting 5, leaving Noah Vonleh in there with Tim Hardaway Jr. and Mitchell Robinson. And we did certainly get information, at the very least. This was a blowout, so the minutes were not entirely accurate, but we could take a few things away. Number one, Emmanuel Mudiay is terrible, and, we said that before this game ever happened, so hopefully you didn't buy into that. Noah Vonleh, the shine is coming off of that one. Figured it would when Kevin Knox came back, and even though they're starting alongside one another, as guys rotate in and out, you're seeing that Vonleh is losing out in that battle. So I think you can probably move on from that if you haven't already. Mitchell Robinson dealt with a little bit of a foot thing in the fourth quarter, so maybe he lost out on 4 or 5 minutes in this game. It seems like if he can stay out of foul trouble and not hurt himself, they're gunning for about half the ball game for him, that 24-minute range, and that's enough, folks. He's not a great rebounder because he's not that thick yet, but defensively, he's crazy. Steal and 3 blocks in this game, you can't drop a guy who can do that. I mean, we're talking about a dude who had a 9-block game recently. I know that, again, the other stuff isn't there, but this dude is a top 120 guy in 9-cat, and otherwise he's looked pretty awful. 5 points, 4 rebounds, just under a steal, and just under 2 blocks. That's how he's gotten to that point. He also never turns the basketball over because he basically doesn't ever touch it on the offensive end. But as this dude works his way up more towards 24 minutes on a nightly basis, he will absolutely be a must-own guy. That type of upside does not grow on trees. I know you guys get impatient, and I don't blame you, because I do too, but you're not dropping Mitchell Robinson. There's just too much there. You're not picking up any of these other weirdo guards. Ntilikina's still a drop. Hezonja, Mudiay, these guys are all terrible. The dude that I do want to spend just a moment talking about is Kevin Knox. I said on yesterday's podcast that I didn't think his fantasy game translated. And after watching him yesterday, I feel pretty good about that assessment. It took him 16 shots to get to 15 points. He played almost 30 minutes and had only 5 rebounds and 1 steal and 1 assist to his credit. That's not enough, guys. Even if you pull out the field goal percentage thing, the only thing he did better than the other guys in the league yesterday was hitting 2 3-pointers. That's it. That was sort of the only benefit. Even the 15 points was okay, but not good enough to be a difference maker. Most fantasy roto leagues, you need to average about 15 or 16 points to be in the mix in that department. So he didn't even really help you there. I will say, though, and this is something I've mentioned on previous podcasts, and I talked about it a little bit on our premium show last night, there's a bell curve aspect to these guys with bad fantasy games, where at some point they're just out there so long that they end up as a fantasy guy. And Kevin Knox could conceivably get to that point. How does he get there? That's the question we have to answer before we say, oh, this is a guy that needs to be on your fantasy team. Because as of now, he really doesn't, even though he's owned in 30% more leagues than David Nwaba. As of right now, he's playing 18.5 minutes a game on the year, and he's outside the top 300 because of his awful field goal percentage. He's a rookie, so there really isn't a way for us to say, well, that's definitely going to come up a bunch, but I think we can safely say at 32.5%, it'll come up a little. But it's not like we can go, well, he's a career 43% shooter, so he'll get back to that point. He's taking tough shots. He's learning the NBA game, and he's missing a lot of them. He also doesn't do anything on the defensive side of the ball. His per 36s are like a steal. It's not very much. And 4 rebounds and like 13 points. That's just not a good fantasy stat. But if he gets to that point of the bell curve where the Knicks are just like, we are awful, Kevin, go take 20 shots a night and see what happens, maybe that'll be enough. So no, I'm not racing to pick him up. I think he's going to be somebody else's headache for a very long time, but there is a world where he's in there long enough to be something. But it's going to be tough, man, unless that shooting percentage comes up a long way. He becomes a punt guy right now. Minnesota's new pieces integrated last night, and it went almost exactly as our buddy Eric Goldman told us it would, and basically as we expected, which is that, 1, Karl Anthony Towns and Jeff Teague played a boatload of minutes and looked really good in them. Andrew Wiggins was mostly not impacted by the new guys, but it's possible that Derrick Rose sitting this game out may have actually, believe it or not, played a little bit of a role in Wiggins taking a team-high 22 shots in their victory. And most importantly, in the battle for minutes, Dario Saric lost. And again, I don't want to do the thing where somebody gets called out on the podcast. That's not what we're for. But I do have beef with the fact that there were some folks out there that were advising drops of Taj Gibson based on the trade alone before seeing even one game happening. That's called being too impatient. You had nothing to lose by just sitting on Gibson for a day, right? There wasn't anybody to pick up from this mix. What did you do? You dropped him for Wilson Chandler? Feh. Blech. What did that get you? That doesn't get you anywhere. Unless there was somebody that was like crazy hot that just needed to be scooped up in that moment, there was no reason to just dump a guy for the sake of dumping him, especially in this scenario. Dario Saric is a more versatile power forward than Taj Gibson, but Taj is Thibs' guy. He's tougher. I don't think there's any arguing that. And he can play backup center and actually defend the position. Whereas Saric, he would be an offensive weapon at the center position, but he would get exploited by a lot of big men. And that's what we saw yesterday. The thing that did surprise me, Gorgui Dieng still got 13 minutes in that game. I thought maybe, as did our buddy over at Canis Hoopus, that Dieng would just be retired to the scrap heap of history. Taj Gibson would get all the backup center minutes, and it didn't work out quite that way. Maybe it will going forward. Very interested to see what happens when Derrick Rose comes back. I think he's going to take a lot of the shots away. Covington got 11 shots in 41 minutes yesterday. That's a lot of time to be on a basketball court, but damn if his defense doesn't translate. We figured he'd be okay. I do think Wiggins taking 22 shots was a very bad thing. That's not good. He's a bad percentage guy from the field. Otherwise, he actually had a decent ball game. And so I think Derrick Rose is going to end up eating into that a little bit. So I believe Derrick Rose is going to be fine. I think Towns and Teague are going to be great. It looks like Covington is just going to dominate with his new team. They love his defense. He's going to be out there. I think Wiggins takes a very slight hit when Rose comes back. And it's possible here that Gibson and Saric, it's possible neither one of them has enough fantasy value to be owned. But I'm sticking with Taj Gibson because he still played 28 minutes. There was sort of no reason for him to have a slow game other than the fact that Towns grabbed 16 rebounds and then Wiggins and Covington took a bunch of the other ones. You can always look at who's on the other side. And in this one, the power forward for Minnesota was largely guarding Niko Mirotic, who, as we know, on the offensive side of the floor is more often out near the three-point line. Whereas it's possible in this particular game, whoever's guarding Drew Holiday might have actually been closer to the rim to grab those rebounds. So you saw more come to Wiggins, more come to Covington, and Gibson being farther away, boxing out Mirotic, just not as many opportunities. So don't freak out. Don't throw Saric away either. Don't panic, guys. You got to be able to give things a couple of games to see how it shakes out before you make a wild move. Yes, yesterday was not a good game for either of them. But Taj Gibson has been a top 75 9-cat guy to this point in the year. Don't just dump that because it seems like it might not be great. Dario Saric, on the other hand, has actually not been very good this year. He showed some signs of life right before getting traded, but I'd still hold on to him for a game or two as well. Hold. Let's wait. We got to find out. Slow-mo, 6-8-5 with a block. He's a steal away from being the guy you drafted, so that's cool. We're finally getting there. Utah lost by 50. I don't have any fantasy thoughts on this game. Wesley Matthews re-injured his hamstring, so hopefully you didn't plug him in without waiting to see if he was okay. Phoenix is the next one on the list of things that we were doing a little homework on for this giant Wednesday card. The Phoenix Suns, TJ Warren is dominating. Isaiah Cannon got hot, but you're not trusting that. Mikal Bridges, this is the guy I want to focus on from that ball game. He played 25 minutes with Trevor Ariza out and didn't do much with it, and I am so relieved. And it's super selfish for me and for all of us here listening to this podcast to not want him to be successful right now. But I don't want casual NBA fans to see one big game from Bridges and pick him up and ruin our ability to sort of pace our pickups because it's not his time yet to be the big guy. They're going to unleash him a little bit more later in the season, but we don't want to have to stash him for a couple of months. I want him to just stay quiet, and then when it's truly time for Bridges to ramp up, then we can go get him. So stay quiet, Bridges. I don't want random jokers falling onto you this fantasy season. You are ours, and we're just biding our time. Final game of the night, Rajon Rondo broke his hand going for a steal, which means Lonzo Ball should be in business. I know there's talk of some of the other guys getting a little more run as well, and so we'll keep an eye on that, but I don't think I'd make any speculative ads at this point because it really comes down to minutes, and those are probably going to go to Lonzo. Lakers beating the Blazers, by the way, for the second consecutive time. Speaking of the Blazers, I think we might as well dig a little deeper. The great Ryne Buchanan of the Blazers Edge is joining us here on Fantasy NBA today. At Blazers Edge is the Twitter account for the website, at Ryne_Buchanan. It's RYNE, like Ryan Sandberg. Welcome to the pod, my good man.
Hey, good to be here.
So, when we started to email, I realized that you were or are a play-by-play broadcaster, and so immediately I was like, okay, I feel comfortable talking to this man, someone close to my heart. Who are you doing play-by-play for these days?
Last year, I was with the River City Rascals, independent team in the Frontier League baseball, and then I'm planning on going back there next year as well. So.
Outstanding. I love it. Everybody that's listened to the show has heard me tell way too many ridiculous tales of time in the minors, long bus rides, and the whole thing. You know what I'm talking about.
Oh, it's a grind.
It is definitely a grind. So we're here to talk Blazers, though. I'm sure you and I could do a couple hours on minor league baseball, but the people listening would maybe stop. The Blazers. This is a team where, I mean, frankly, there were not a ton of personnel questions going into the year just because of salary situations and how the team was a little bit hamstrung when it come to what they could actually do. And I have to admit, Ryan, I was concerned going into the year that Portland would suffer from what I like to call stagnation syndrome, when a team has almost the exact same personnel year after year after year and can't seem to quite get over that hump. And you see it with the Miami Heat in the Eastern Conference. They just sort of fizzled. It's just like, all right, we know we're tired. This is not going to work. We need to change something. And Portland's gone entirely the other direction. The Blazers have come out guns blazing, incredible defensive intensity. They're 10-3 in the early going at the time of recording this segment. Of course, the likely air in a couple of days, and they may be either 11-3 or 10-4 at that point. But I guess my question for you, Ryan, is how have they been able to come out with this kind of focus when it seems like emotionally they should be more drained than ever?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I'm right there with you on kind of my expectations heading into the year, and I can tell you that a lot of Blazers fans felt the same way. This is as much of a surprise to us than it is to everybody else, but I think a large part of the credit has to go to Damian Lillard. He's the leader, and he's been there, done that, and I think he keeps this team fresh and he leads by example out there. I think you got to give credit to Terry Stotts with what he's done. You're basically you've got almost a whole new bench this year. They didn't bring in the big names. You're talking Nick Stauskas, Seth Curry, the emergence of Zach Collins, but guys have stepped up in their roles a lot more than I think a lot of people expected. And so it's been a pleasant surprise here to get going. Like I said, I think you've got to give a lot of credit to Damian Lillard, Terry Stotts, even Neil Olshey, quite frankly. He's taken a lot of heat, understandably so. But, he went out, he got these pieces off the bench. They've gotten Evan Turner into a role that suits him much better than they have had in the past. He's kind of running the point guard role, per se, in that second unit. They've surrounded him with shooters, and it's working.
Yeah, it seems like they've also finally said to Evan, listen, if you don't want to take a three-pointer, that's okay. We'll let you shoot some twos. Is that part of what's been like finally not trying to jam a square peg into a round hole with him? He's just looked more comfortable in almost every facet of the game this year.
Yeah, definitely. I think this is the best that they've utilized him. He's not a three-point shooter. He can knock it down occasionally, but he's not a guy that you want taking. He is money from mid-range and getting to the rim. That's his game, as well as distributing to others, and a good defensive player as well. Realistically, with the contract he's got, he's still probably not worth it. But at least at this point, he's really providing you with some good stuff off the bench, leading that second unit, getting the ball to those shooters, getting his own shot when he needs to, and lockdown defender as well.
So what's to become of CJ McCollum? He seems to be sort of bouncing between extremely hot stretches and extremely cold ones. Is there a middle ground for him? Because we know how good he can be.
Yeah, no, unfortunately, it doesn't appear there is. This has kind of been the book on CJ over the last few years, is that there'll be times where he just completely disappears from the offense, and then there'll be times when he's on fire. And this past week was one of those times where he went absolutely on fire. A huge 40-point effort against the Bucks. Big reason he got Player of the Week, much deserved. And it was so funny because he was taking despite the hot start. One of the early storylines amongst Blazers fans is what's going on with CJ McCollum, because he just was having by his standards, a dreadful start to the season. So I think it's really nice to see him kind of get out of that slump. But the issue, as you mentioned, that's kind of what he does. He's up and down. So, I don't think at this point you can expect that he's going to be a guy who can, give you 25 every night. He could probably give you 12 to 15 every night, but I don't know. I think he is who he is at this point.
We're talking to Ryne Buchanan of the Blazers Edge. We'll give you that Twitter handle again in just a couple of moments here. The wing position, you mentioned Nick Stauskas coming in, and Seth Curry, I guess technically more of a guard type. Stauskas has had these sort of outburst games, but as you also mentioned, those guys have been sort of situational to this point, and it's part of what makes this Blazers team so interesting is it really is Lillard, Nurkic, Aminu, McCollum. It's those guys. It's what we've seen for like 2 years, 3 years running now, and it's kind of amazing that they've been able to kind of get to this point. So defensively, this is my transition point now. Defensively, Aminu, is he the engine on that end of the floor? Is one of the big pieces so far this year simply the fact that he's finally been healthy for a month?
Yeah, no, definitely. He's the defensive force out there. He'll take the team. He'll take the LeBron. He'll take Giannis Antetokounmpo. I thought he did a really good job defensively against both those guys in the early go. And they're still going to get their 20 points, but he's able to slow them down. And, he's a 3-and-D guy, so he's going to give you those threes on the offensive end as well. You can be a little streaky at times, but his bread and butter is his defensive game, and that's something that, at least since he's been in Portland, he's always been good at. And then in that second unit, the defensive anchor really has been Zach Collins. Yeah. He has just been incredible on the defensive end of the court, really turned into a great rim protector. Evan Turner's solid as well. Stauskas has played solid defense. I know he kind of had a reputation of just a spot-up three-point shooter, but he's shown that he has a more multi-dimensional game than I know I certainly thought. I think a lot of different guys are stepping up. Damian Lillard over the last couple of years has really improved his game defensively, and it all kind of goes together, and they're gelling right now as a team.
Yeah, it's pretty remarkable. The center position, you mentioned Zach Collins. Yusuf Nurkic is the starting center on this team. There are nights where Collins gets more minutes than Nurkic, although they're not every night. Nurk, coming off a couple of pretty big ball games, he's able to sort of force his way in. Is there a world where that changes at any point, or is this, as long as it's working, I guess, if it ain't broke, don't fix it kind of thing. But let's say, hypothetically, the Blazers go on a little bit of a losing spell. Who's the guy that gets tagged first? Is it Nurk?
Yeah, I think that it's a really interesting situation because they've got very different games, and obviously the future is more with Zach Collins, but Nurk is still young as well. The biggest issue is there's matchups in today's game where he just doesn't work. I look at when he had to defend a Markieff Morris. This was, I believe, the Blazers' first loss. It was against Washington a couple weeks ago, and they didn't have Dwight Howard yet, so they had to go really small. And they basically had Markieff Morris at the 5. And they just ran the pick and pop to death, and Nurk just doesn't have the speed to get out there on the perimeter, whereas Zach Collins does. Nurkic is the better offensive player, a little bit stronger. Collins is getting stronger. But obviously the future is with Zach Collins. But, they paid a decent amount of money to Nurk in the offseason too, and he's going to be around for a few years. So they've got to figure out a way, in my eyes, to make those two coexist. And I think the biggest problem that you can have with that is Nurkic is a player who at times has a bit of a motivation issue. It hasn't really cropped up this year, but we certainly saw it last year, certainly saw it towards the end of his time in Denver. You want to make sure that you keep him involved, keep him happy, because if you just hand the keys over to Collins and just expect Nurk to fill in, it's not going to work out that way. See, I think they need to be really careful about keeping both those guys involved, use it depending on matchups. Whenever you can use Nurk, use him, but not be afraid to lean on Collins as well.
There's no way where one of them could potentially play the 4. They're too big, right?
Yeah, I mean, there have been times where they play on the same court at the same time. I think you might see that a little bit out of Collins. It's still kind of growing. But, yeah, Nurk is a 5, and Collins is towards a 5. He's still a bit of a tweener at this point. So but I think they mostly like him in that 5 role. However, when you get a guy like Myers Leonard in there off the bench, then Zach will sometimes slide into that 4 role. So he's a bit more versatile. So if one of them did have to play the 4, it would be Collins.
You brought him up. I wasn't going to do it, but I got to ask about Myers Leonard because now he's become a cult hero for the fact that he hasn't blocked a shot in about 3.5 years.
That's not his game.
He's setting records though. It's NBA record stuff. I forget the exact number, but this is a 7-footer who hasn't blocked a shot. What is it? It's like 400 minutes or something in a row he's been on the floor.
Yeah, no, that's Myers. He's always been a bit of an enigma, but I think he's shown some really positive signs this year. He has a very limited role. Depending on the matchups, he's the 3rd or 4th big off the bench, or excuse me, 4th or 5th big off the bench. Caleb Swanigan has stepped up in his spots as well, but he's really thrived in this smaller role. His job is to do what he can defensively, space the floor, knock down threes, and that's really it at this point. They don't need him to be a big shot blocker. So, yeah, I mean, the record is what it is, but I've been impressed with what I've seen with him. I think he's doing a nice job, and he's in a role that fits him now where they're not asking him to do too much.
Yeah, he actually has looked a bit more comfortable over the last 3 or 4 games or so, maybe, but slightly more consistent minutes. I just remember a time 2 or 3 years ago where the fantasy community was getting ready to go nuts for this guy. He could step out and hit the 3. He could fly through the air. He was grabbing 9-10 rebounds a night, and it just seems like one of those things where you almost have to recalibrate to what he actually is as opposed to what everybody was sort of hoping he might become one day. And frankly, like you said, you've got Zach Collins now, looks like he might be what they all thought Myers Leonard was going to be. Okay, so where do they go from here now? Portland, with this long homestand, super successful homestand. I think they went, 5-1 against a whole bunch of really good teams?
5-1, yep.
Yeah, only loss coming to the Lakers. They start a road trip in L.A. Can they take this momentum out on the road with them? They did it on their first road trip. I guess, is there anything that could stop them this time around?
I think the only thing that could, if you look at potentially something that could stop them, is just that they feed into the hype. They're one of the darlings of the NBA right now. So you worry a little bit about, maybe they'll take this and they won't be able to keep the same intensity. You look at the trip coming up, the back end is brutal because you've got at Milwaukee and then at Golden State.
Yikes.
Really, you start off with the Lakers, and with LeBron, they're going to be tough. They're getting better. I do appreciate that they played them. This will be the 3rd time they play them early. Because that's a team that I think is just going to get better as the season goes on. You've got Minnesota, who's a bit of a mess right now. You've got Washington, who's an absolute dumpster fire. You've got a Knicks team that is essentially tanking right now. So that middle part of the trip is not hard at all. But it's going to come down to those last 2 games. This will be the first time they play the Warriors. You know that the Bucks are going to be looking for revenge after it happened. But I think as long as they keep the pedal to the metal, they can't let up at all, which has been at times what has happened in the past. I think as long as they keep the same intent.
Nope.
What's that?
I thought I lost you for a second there. Sorry. Continue. As long as they keep the intensity, I think was the last thing you said.
Yeah. So as long as they keep the intensity and they don't read too much in the record, they don't hear all these stories about people talking about how good they are. I think they'll be okay.
I want to ask about just one more player, and then we'll let you get back to your day, and that's Seth Curry, who showed in his time with the Mavericks he can actually be a really efficient basketball player and kind of an underrated shooter, which is weird to say when, you're Steph Curry's brother and all. Do you think his role increases as this season goes on? He seems like a really good candidate to soak up more of those backup point and shooting guard minutes.
I really don't see his role increasing that much. I think he's kind of right in the spot. He's going to be kind of that 12 to 15 minutes a game coming up. Evan Turner handles the ball in that second unit, and Seth's job is basically to space the floor and knock down the open three when he gets it. And that's something that he's actually struggled with at times in the early going. He had a really nice game the other night, knocking down three-pointers for a season high 9 points. But I think he's still he was out basically all of last year with the leg injury, so I think he's still kind of getting his feet under him, getting used to the new team. And I think he will kind of ease into that role better and better as the season goes on. But as far as an expanded role, I really don't see it out of him. I think he's kind of right where he should be right now, and I expect it to stay that way.
Ryne Buchanan. He is Ryne_Buchanan, RYNE_Buchanan on Twitter. He's a staff writer at Blazers Edge and a host of Blazers Edge Radio. Can people listen to that somewhere if they're not necessarily in Portland? Can they get you elsewhere?
They can, yeah. It's Blazers Edge Radio, as you mentioned. It's every Tuesday, noon Pacific time. It's an X-Ray FM, little independent station up in Portland. You can listen online, xray.fm. That's Tuesdays at noon. Then if you happen to miss the show, I always post the podcast link on my personal Twitter. And then there's a Blazers Edge Radio Facebook page as well, where we post the link for every show. And so, we just kind of, it's an expansion of the site where once a week, me and my co-host, who's a local musician in the area and a big Blazers fan, kind of recap the games, talk about the big storylines among the Blazers and the rest of the league as well, and kind of wrap it up with the week ahead, and we'll give our predictions on what we think will happen and whatnot.
Freaking awesome. Ryan, you're the man. Thank you so much.
Problem anytime.
Good stuff from Ryan. I love talking to these play-by-play guys. It's so easy. It's so easy. It just feels so comfortable for me. They're my people. Short Thursday card, so we're not going to spend more than a minute or two on this. Houston 3-point favorites at home to the Warriors. Denver by 13 over Atlanta, and the Clippers by 5.5 against San Antonio. I do not have strong feelings on any of these games. There's no real revenge angles. There's no misvaluations on things. I think Houston does win this game against the Warriors, but I don't know by how much. Clippers against a beleaguered San Antonio team, but they're going to be pissed after losing against Phoenix, so I think I'm leaving this stuff alone. From a fantasy standpoint, obviously with Houston, we're watching James Ennis. He showed some signs of life in that last ball game. P.J. Tucker, Gary Clark, they've got all these defense-first guys. Somebody's going to have to fall into something. Atlanta, I can't stop watching Jeremy Lin. I'm so sorry, but I have to do it. And then Spurs-Clippers, well, it's that Clippers backcourt. It was always you. What was that? I can't remember what movie that was. Is that Jerry Maguire? I don't know. No, that's You Had Me at Hello. The Clippers backcourt. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, he's been playing really well the last couple games. Can Patrick Beverley do some stuff on the offensive side? Derek White, his continued growth over on the Spurs side as well. So no homework assignments tonight. It's TNT Thursday. Just sit back, enjoy, watch the games. And probably won't be any massive pickups or drops on the docket either. Tomorrow, we will wrap up the week here on Fantasy NBA Today live with Aaron Bruski. That'll be in the late morning Pacific time. I hope you'll join us over at YouTube. You can ask questions while the show is going, and we will answer them for you on freaking air. Thanks again to everybody for listening. Thanks to Ryne Buchanan for hopping on. I am Dan Besbris. This has been Fantasy NBA Today, a hoopball presentation. We'll talk to you tomorrow.
This has been a Hoop Ball presentation.